Strange winter. We had 60 degrees on Saturday, which is very unheard of for us in Minnesota at this time of the year. We live in a little town of Graston, Minnesota. It's about 70 miles straight north of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I've been a tomato grower. We were trying to figure out the other day how long it's been. It'll be 31 years this fall. We've commercially marketed tomatoes, green beans, rhubarb, and now we've got lettuce that is also in the greenhouse. I'm an engineer by trade. I do a lot of design work for this industry. Currently on a retainer with Crop King doing some design work for them. And our most recent project is involving bringing an automated lettuce system from Europe. And we were over in Denmark here earlier this year, working with a company over there to modify their system to bring it into the United States. So we're pretty excited about that. Labor certainly has become a major issue in this industry, and anything we can do to save labor certainly is dollars back into our pocket. My speech this morning is really designed to hopefully build a little bit on what Rick has already given, also to provoke thought. It wasn't intended to be political or controversial or whatever, but hopefully to provoke some thought as we go through the next few days and hear a lot of really good stuff from expert speakers. So, why grow in a controlled environment? I'm going to start here by asking the question, how do we feed 8 billion people by the year 2025? This is starting to become, in the world of agriculture, a very serious problem. We're on that path now where population is increasing very quickly around the world. By the year 2050, I know that looks like a long ways away, but it really isn't. 9.5 billion people. 10.5 by 2075. And by the end of the century, 11 billion people. I'm going to ask another question. Are you part of the problem, or are you part of the solution? In the United States now, the number of people actually working in agriculture continues to decrease. The average age is 58 years of age. Every land-grant college agricultural program is either stable or declining. I live in Minnesota, and unfortunately in Minnesota, we really have not placed value on our agricultural education. Dr. Jackson was talking this morning about extension. In our state now, our extension program is almost non-existent. And that has been really the foundation of our agricultural education in the United States for over 100 years. We're getting to the point now in Minnesota where we have 4 or 5 counties, 1 extension agent. Where it's really hurt is with our young kids. We do a lot of work, both Chris and I, with 4-H groups and FFA and groups like that. And even in very rural agricultural areas, you go into schools and ask children, where does their food come from? You know what the number 1 answer is? Walmart. So, are you part of the problem, or are you part of the solution? By the end of this year, I will have 7.4 billion people in the world. World population growth right now is a little over 1%. Now, 1% doesn't sound like a big deal, but take 1% of 7.4 billion, and we're going to gain 78 million people in the world just in this year. Minnesota has about 3 million people in the state. I think Mississippi is pretty close to that also. You can imagine, you know, if we had to put 78 more million people in this state, where are we going to put them? But more importantly, how are we going to feed them? Worldwide, we've got about 3 million acres of tillable, arable land. Every year, we lose about 75 million acres worldwide. Think about that for a moment. Our population is going up. Our land that we've been growing on is going down. This is a serious, serious problem. Now I'm getting up there in years. It's probably not going to be my generation to solve that. I'm not going to have to worry about it. And maybe even Chris's generation won't have to worry about it. But certainly, my grandkids, will have to worry about where is our food going to come from. Okay, how to feed the world. My first statement up here, and this is really a summary of some of the talk that is starting to go on in the agricultural world today. This first one is better plants. In any speech with experts talking about how to feed the world, the number one topic is how we can come up with better plants. And I know this is very controversial, especially when we start talking about GMOs and designer plants. I mean, that's a subject that nobody wants to talk about. We think that it's voodoo science. There are groups out there that would probably lynch me if I said that, I grow GMO corn. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we need better plants. We need efficient water use through crop selection and systems employed. Crop selection goes hand in hand with better plants. Plants that are drought tolerant, plants that can grow on less water, are more efficient usage of water. Creation of sustainable growing systems. I've done a lot of work down in Mexico and down along on the Baja Peninsula and down in that area. The Mexican government has put a tremendous amount of money in taking seawater, desalting it, and pumping it up on the land. They've also learned to cut corners with this. They don't take all of the salt out. So what has happened is they're pumping this water up onto the land that has a quite high salinity in it yet. Slowly, they're poisoning that land to the point where our plants that we currently have will not grow in it. Again, new hybrids, plants that are able to grow in soils that traditionally we would not think that they'd be able to grow in. Fertilizers to maximize nutrient content of output. The U.S., we don't regulate things like nitrates in our edible products. And if you go over into northern Germany, Holland, places like that, by law, they dictate what the nutritional content of the final output is. In the United States, we use nitrogen. Why do we use nitrogen? Get things to grow. Nitrogen elongates things, makes things bigger, makes things grow faster. The greenhouse that we'll be going in today has some young plants in it and some old plants in it. When you look at the young plants, they're very, very wrapped up tight, very vegetative, very thick-skinned. That's due to the amount of nitrogen that is in the water that is being fed to them based on the environmental factors and conditions that they've had, i.e. lack of sunlight has really allowed these plants to wrap themselves up quite tight. What does that do to our final product? In their case, tomatoes. If you were to analyze tomatoes, they're probably going to be relatively high in nitrates. In Europe, they've realized that high nitrates can be a health problem, and they regulate that very carefully. So, fertilize to maximize the nutrient content of output. Match land use to crop grown. If you think about the United States, where does the bulk of our vegetables come from? California. What's going on in California?
They're out of water.
They're out of water. You know, I know when you go, especially in some of the southern parts of California, it's very beautiful country. But you turn the water off, what happens? It turns back to desert. Are these areas where we're matching land use to the crop grown? Is there better areas in the United States that we should be growing our vegetables in? And the final one here is increase overall productivity of the farmer. How do we do that? And in the row crop industry, and the big piece of technology that all the big guys are starting to use is auto steer type programs, that type of thing that you map your field using GPS technology and global positioning type software. That gets fed to the computer, and it literally drives that tractor across the field. It changes the amount of seeds that your planter is dropping. It changes the amount of spray that you're putting on that field. All of this is an attempt here to increase overall productivity of the farmer. But in general, worldwide, labor is becoming a huge, huge problem. Where do you find people that want to do manual labor, getting on their hands and knees, working that crop? I travel a lot around the country, and I deal with a lot of different growers. And the complaint that almost every grower is telling me today is, I can't find help. And it does not matter what you pay them. You know, there's a big push in this country to raise our minimum wage. That's not the problem. And I have growers now that are paying $15, $20 an hour. Well, what does that do to your bottom line? Are we able to pass that along to the consumer? Restaurants are. The other day, Chris and his brother and I went into Hardee's, which is the same thing as Carl Jr. down south. We bought 3 hamburgers. It was $24. They figured out how to pass it along. Okay, some fundamental changes that needs to happen worldwide. And again, these are summaries of what the discussion is going on around the world. I don't mean it to be political or anything else. Change in political will, public policy, laws and regulations. Think about this statement for a moment. What do we hear on the news? We hear stuff on, for example, on GMOs that's going to destroy the earth. It's horrible. You know, we shouldn't be eating it. We're all going to get cancer from it or whatever. That kind of stuff makes it into the news. However, does it make it into the news that by us using that type of technology has been able to increase yields, being able to increase nutrient content in the final output, being able to use land more efficiently, be able to use water more efficiently? And I'm not an advocate for GMOs. Don't take this the wrong way. But that's what this type of technology and using designer hybrids and designer seeds is allowing us to be able to do. Placement of product value based on the inputs required and nutritional value of the final output. Think about the products that you buy in the grocery store. How is that valued? We've been in the tomato business a long, long time, and I've dealt with a lot of different produce managers over the years and whatever. Just because I have a tomato that's listed hydroponic or greenhouse grown, or I can say is locally grown, automatically that produce manager wants to place value on it that sometimes is as much as double, if not 3 times, what the products are that are coming out of the field. Do I get that same return? Irritates me to no end if I'm selling a tomato, say at $1.50 a pound, and they mark it up and put it out there at $4.99. Where's placement of value? Society philosophy change and how we value individuals in agriculture. My mother's a classic example. My mother is a very educated woman, When I came home and stated that I was going to go into agriculture, her first comment out of her mouth was, "You're going to be a farmer?" My mother's in her 90s, and she's at the end of her life. Still to this day, even though I've been in this industry, since high school, and she still looks at me and thinks of me in the way, "Well, you're just a dumb farmer. You go and play in the dirt." "Well, no, Mom, I don't play in the dirt. I don't have dirt in my greenhouse." But this is a philosophy that needs to change. And we need to place value on our farmer. Ultimately, if you wanted to have the ultimate terrorist weapon, control the food. If you read about ancient civilizations, all the big civilizations that have been on Earth, the Greeks, the Romans, the Mayans, whatever, yeah, they had their wars, but what did them in the end? They relied upon someone else to feed them. If you don't have control of the food, you lose in the end. We need to place value on people that are providing us our food. Place priority on funding and developing agricultural education programs that will train the next generation of producers, researchers, designers, educators, and manufacturers. What's happening in this country with our land-grant colleges, our extension programs? Mississippi is lucky. They have one of the best programs, I think, in the United States. Many states now are saying that we're not going to place value, we're not going to place money into our extension programs and into our farm programs. The University of Minnesota used to be very known for its agriculture programs. The farm campus, or we used to call it the MUU campus, is over on the St. Paul side of the U of M. Guess what's happening to that campus? The School of Business now has moved across the river and has taken over that area. What used to be research plots, they're plowing it up to build a new student center and things like that. Are they replacing that by moving those classes and that research to somewhere else? No. Our state, our leaders in our state are not placing value. That's an area that tax dollars should be spent. And this last one is where I get excited about, this acceptance of the role of science and technology in the production of our food. There's a huge trend in the United States right now that we need to go back to the basics. We need to have heirloom varieties and old varieties, and that people have this expectation that farming is easy. We're out there with a hoe pulling weeds. And Chris and I, we also run a field operation of corn and soybeans and alfalfa hay. I can tell you this, I'm not going to go out and hoe, several hundred acres of corn. There's not enough people in the world to even begin to think about doing that. And whether we like it or not, science and technology is going to play a huge role on whether we eat. All right. CEA is one part of many possible solutions. What we'll be talking about in the next 2 days is a very small part of how we're going to feed the world. But it is a part, and it's a very important part of how we're going to feed the world. So, what is CEA? Well, some definitions. The C stands for control, to determine the behavior or outcome of a growing plant. E stands for environment, the physical surroundings that affects, influences, and determines the final outcome of a growing plant. A is agriculture, the science or practice of growing plants. And when we put it all together, we get a definition: the systems and methods that strives to control all the inputs and outputs necessary for a growing plant. We can also growing out here are aquatic plants. Some things to think about. Okay, in CEA, we have precise control over water and nutrients. Actually, very precise control. I could have Chris right now go onto his computer and pull up exactly how many gallons of water was fed to that greenhouse. I could pull up exactly how many pounds of fertilizer went to it at any point in time. He's got it down to a science now, down to he's taking readings every couple seconds. I could tell you in the last 5 minutes what that crop was fed. Now, I'm not saying you have to be quite that high-tech, but you do need to know how much water that you're using and how much fertilizer you're using. Keep pushing the wrong button, I'm sorry. And this happens to be an injector system where you're mixing some fertilizer in stock solutions, and through these little pumps are injected into these tanks back here. The greenhouse that we're going to go in here later this afternoon has 2 different types of systems. If you go in their lettuce house, they have a bulk tank. They're mixing very precise amounts of fertilizer into a given volume of water. In the tomato house, they're injecting fertilizer on line. And again, very precise amounts injected in a given flow of water going out to those plants. In the lettuce side, that's a recirculating system. So as the water flows through the plastic channels that the lettuce are in, it comes back to the beginning. And what does the grower do? He analyzes what's in that tank so he knows what to add back into that. On the tomato side, it is a one-way system, but we're really managing through drippers and through the injectors the amount of water that that plant gets. We were in their house. Both Lee and Jamie have had some issues here this year, which has hurt them hard, and you'll see that when we get out there. But we were down here 3 weeks ago trying to help them correct some of their problems. One of the things that we found was they were way overfeeding their plants. Well, on the tomato side, that extra feed just went to waste. Opportunity for water recovery. You can see this tomato grower here has a metal channel that's in underneath all the plants for the very purpose of collecting the water that was fed to them. This particular grower happens to reuse that water, and it will go back again through the tomato crop. Now, what you'll see in the greenhouse today, it's a Beto bucket system. It's sitting on an 1.5-inch poly line, which is capable of collecting every ounce of water that comes out of those buckets. Now, they are not reusing it, but they certainly could. Lettuce is generally pretty simple, even on a floating raft system. We have a very given amount of water in here. We know what to put in there for fertilizer. I found some of these statistics are kind of interesting. Field grown, for every pound of tomato, you need about 100 gallons of water. Now, this number certainly, will change somewhat based on the environment and time of the years or whatever. But in general terms, you need to make 1 pound of tomato. That's a tomato about this big. You needed 100 gallons. In the greenhouse, we can get by with as little as 1 gallon of water. So is this a water saving story? When you talk about lettuce is worse yet. 150 gallons of water to make 1 head of lettuce. And again, that fluctuates somewhat depending on the time of the year, how warm it is, etc. In our greenhouse at home, we've grown on as little as one gallon to make 1 head of lettuce. And actually, we've even used less water than that. And again, that will fluctuate depending on, how hot it is and the time of the year somewhat. Gives options for controlling bugs and diseases. Just because you're in a greenhouse does not make us immune to bugs and diseases. Over the years, I certainly have had my share of bugs. I'll give you a quick story. It was in the middle of January. I went in there and we found russet mites on some of our tomato plants. Small little bug. Well, the word russet, refers to the color brown, and then by the time you get so many of them in there, it will literally turn the leaf brown in color. Well, the bugs you can't see unless you've got about a 10-powered lens or whatever to see them. Minnesota in January, our average temperature is about 0. At home, we've seen temperatures 35 degrees below 0. Where in the world did a russet mite come from in January in Minnesota in our greenhouse? Came from me. I deliver tomatoes to grocery stores. You take it to the back of grocery stores, and incidentally, those of you that are in this industry know this, but grocery stores are one of the most filthy places. It looks all shiny and pretty, out where the customer is. Go behind that back wall and see what's back there. Well, somewhere along the line, by me bringing in those boxes of tomatoes, I picked up russet mites on me, and they hitchhiked a ride into my greenhouse and made the leap into my crop. And what made it worse, the particular russet mite that I have is only found in the southwestern part of the United States and Mexico. So guess where that product had come from? So in the greenhouse, though, we've got some different options that we don't have out in the field. We can let in predators that go after the bad bugs. We can use disease, or some of the chemicals that we can use are certainly much more benign than what we would use out in the field. So we do have options. But probably our biggest option is don't let them in the first place. Bugs like your greenhouse. It's a perfect environment for them. They don't have to deal with 20 below and warm temperatures and whatever. It's constant in there. And we had an outbreak here a number of years ago with aphids in our lettuce. Chris and I, when we came back from Denmark, we had looked at some of their lettuce, and it had aphids in it also. And we were joking with the grower and said, "Oh, you got aphids in there." He looked at me and said, "So what?" I thought, that was kind of a strange comment to make. In this country, if you have one bug in that head of lettuce, are you going to buy it? You as a consumer, are you going to complain about it? Big time. In Denmark, the guy looked at me, "So what? Why, aphids not a big deal. It's natural." But their society has been able to adapt and change that that's okay. It's a little more protein. All right, CEA, use of systems for heating and cooling control. And you can see we got a lot of different systems here, an evaporative cool pad. Here's an open roof system that's relying on passive ventilation, no powered type equipment. Heating, a lot of different options. Big operation here using very, very large boilers. Some of the big Dutch houses use these types of boilers. They scrub CO2 out of the exhaust. They take the water that comes out of the exhaust, which is slightly acidic. They use that to regulate their pH. They use the CO2 to dump into the greenhouse to enhance growth. Plus they make the heat to heat the greenhouse. Very high-tech, very expensive equipment. There's a lot of interest now in northern climates with using geothermal. That's free energy that's in the earth. The downside that we've seen with these types of systems, they generally react quite slowly, so you probably need a backup of some sort of propane fire. I've got quite a few growers that use wood. If you want to be in the wood business, stoking a fire all the time, that's certainly an adequate source of heat. With our very first greenhouse, I heated with wood. We went through our first year about 110 cords of wood, and I said, I don't have enough time to be out there cutting and chopping and whatever. I don't want to be in that business. Cooling fans to help keep the house cool. CEA allows for options of light control. Obviously out in the field, we can't control what light gets onto that crop. In a controlled environment, we certainly can. And this top cover, I don't know how well that picture looks out to you, but this is a polyester type film that is made. There's two places in the world it's made. One is in Germany and the other is in Japan. If you remember back when Japan had that tsunami a number of years ago, some of the pictures that they showed on the news, you saw this wave of junk coming and hitting these greenhouses. And I know there was one picture, there was a car sitting on top of the greenhouse. And I asked the question is, how in the world, because I thought it was a poly-covered house, how in the world can a car be sitting on top of the house without ripping that poly? This stuff is incredibly tough. Incidentally, the new Viking Stadium that's being built in downtown Minneapolis right now, the south side of it uses this stuff. If you think back to the Olympics that were in Beijing, the aquatic center was covered with this. It's a 6 mil thick polymer, very, very high properties of light transmittance coming through it. And it approaches glass. It's actually as good as glass. Yeah, did you have a question?
Is that ETFE?
Yes. Yeah. Very, very interesting material. It's expensive, but you cover your greenhouse once with it, you probably will not be recovering it again in your lifetime. The pluses to it, it's resistant to hail. If you ever get a hole in it, you go out there with a patch kit. I'm old enough to say we used to have inner tubes in, tractor tires and whatever. If you get a hole in it, you had a, chemical patch that you put on it. That's how you repair this stuff, and you're back in business.
How long does it last?
The company warrants it right now for 10 years. It's been on houses in Japan for over 25 years now. And the product was originally developed by DuPont for the old Apollo space program. And DuPont didn't see any value in it and sold it off, and the Germans and the Japanese ended up with the patents for it. Yeah.
Does it lose light transmission over time?
No, that's the beauty behind it. Unlike polyfilm, double polyfilm, day one is your best day. It diminishes pretty quickly. When you buy a 4-year or 6-year or whatever polyfilm, that has nothing to do with light transmittance. It has to do with degradation of that poly or breakdown of that poly. On our greenhouse at home, we change our poly every 2 years. And I do that strictly to get more light in your greenhouse. Kind of a rough rule, 1% more light is going to be 1% more production. So it pays for us to do that, at least on the lettuce plant. Some other things for light control, this is a shade system that's in here. This is kind of the ultimate of shade systems. This was taken in Mexico as we flew into Colima Valley. Underneath all this gray, ugly looking stuff here is greenhouses. And they use it in Mexico to control heat in these houses. In this particular area, there's roughly about 2,000 acres now worth of greenhouses. And it's growing very, very quickly. Some other things, this is the ability to add supplemental light. I mean, this is using sodium, a metal halide. This is a plasma fixture. And this is LEDs. And right now there's a tremendous amount of interest in LEDs, that's going to be the best way to light a crop. I'll just say a couple things about LEDs real quick. We've done a lot of research with them. LEDs is very focused, very pointed light. And you can come up with some very strange disorders in your final product if you're not scattering that light and diffusing that light. Possibility of crop automation system. Sometimes it's hard to get good pictures, but this bottom picture, this came from our last trip in Denmark. What's going on in here? This is a robotic seeder. It's taking all these little plants here and it's putting it into a plastic channel. I guess I didn't get any of the channels here. That will go out to the greenhouse. In Denmark, labor rates there, their minimum wage right now is $32 an hour. I asked him, what do you get for a head of lettuce? 70 cents, 80 cents. And I looked at him, how in the world do you pay $32 an hour? Incidentally, they can't get enough labor at $32 an hour. So they go to Poland and to Russia to import people in, and they pay them about $45 an hour to work in their lettuce crop. I said, how in the world do you do that? Automation. The facility that we were in, the day that we were there, they were harvesting chives. There was 3 people in here managing this whole thing. As they harvested, this equipment here automatically reseeded, sent channels back out to the greenhouse. There wasn't a person that touched it. They had 3 people in a 12-acre facility. 3 people. It was fun stuff to see. Use of technology for precise control of all functions. Computers today are cheap, and certainly they've infected every aspect of our life. If you're not using, at least on the low end, the iGrows, Grower's Choice type equipment in there, you're throwing money out the window. The old Dayton thermostats just don't cut it anymore. This stuff has capability of staging equipment. It will save money for you very, very quickly. And we've gone and put in even low-dollar equipment into greenhouses. Generally, you have a payback on that equipment within 1 year. And that's just staging that equipment so that, you don't have heats and fans and stuff fighting each other. But the bigger one is you're probably out of the get-go going to see an increase in production. I've seen as much as 30% just by changing how we control equipment. This bottom one here, Chris is kind of a computer geek. This is his favorite slide. This is his control panel. All right, and lastly, what's happening around the world is increasing agricultural land pressure for other uses. Remember a minute ago I said 75 million acres of land we will lose this year to other things. This is California. If you put water on the land in California, it's some of the most fertile land in the world. It's very, very fertile, but we don't have water. But should we be growing people there too? How many gallons a day does a person need? Our highway system. I don't remember what the statistics were, but if you think about our freeway system, and when we do things like this, the number of acres of land that gets wasted just so that we can go around in a little circle to get on and off our roads. You go in many areas of Europe, they don't build roads like this. You come up to some sort of roundabout or something that is much smaller. Driving in the countryside in Holland, they farm in between their lanes, or you'll see livestock grazing in between the lanes. And of course these things, we're growing them everywhere. Okay, in conclusion, are you part of the problem? Or are you part of the solution? As we go forward the next day or so, think about this in the talks that you hear and what we'll be learning. Oh, we're at time, Rick. Take two? Okay.
Steve, is that polyester stuff available in the United States?
Right now, no, it is not. There is some companies that have used it in commercial type applications.